Racist store manager slapped a black elderly woman. He regretted it 2 minutes later. She only wanted to buy a loaf of bread. Nothing fancy, nothing special. Just an ordinary trip to the store. But that day, inside those polished glass doors and under the cold glow of fluorescent lights, something happened that would turn an everyday errand into a moment no one inside that store would ever forget. She was a grandmother, graceful, soft-spoken, and dressed in her Sunday best even though it was just a weekday. She moved slowly, leaning on her cane, every step measured but steady. People passed her by without a second glance, but what they didn't know was that this quiet, elderly black woman carried a strength that came from a lifetime of enduring storms. To most, she looked like just another customer. But to the store manager, she became something else entirely. He didn't see her dignity. He didn't see her worth. All he saw was someone he believed he could belittle, someone he thought he could push aside. In his arrogance, he didn't realize that the woman standing before him had more power than he could possibly imagine. It started with a few harsh words, sharp enough to cut through the air and make heads turn. Customers nearby froze, their eyes darting between the old woman and the man in the pressed shirt and name badge. The tension thickened, the kind of silence that presses down on your chest. And then, just like that, he crossed the line. His hand lashed out, striking her across the face. Gasps echoed through the aisles. Shoppers dropped their baskets, phones came out, and disbelief rippled through the store. An elderly black woman, humiliated in front of strangers, treated as if her presence didn't matter. The sting of his palm on her cheek wasn't just an assault on her, it was an assault on dignity itself. But here's the twist. He had no idea who she was. No idea of the authority she carried, the influence she wielded, or the fire that lay just beneath her calm surface. In the next 2 minutes, his world, and the world of everyone on his management team, would be turned upside down, because sometimes the person you underestimate the most is the one who holds your entire future in their hands. The day had begun like any other for Evelyn Carter. To her grandchildren, she was Grandma Evie, a woman of wisdom, resilience, and quiet humor. To her neighbors, she was the one who still brought homemade pies to church on Sundays, always greeting people with a smile that carried warmth. But beneath that gentle exterior was a woman who had seen more of life's battles than most people twice her age. At 72 years old, Evelyn had lived through decades of both progress and prejudice. She had marched in protests as a young woman, sat at counters where she wasn't welcome, and raised her children with the reminder that dignity wasn't something the world could give you. It was something you carried no matter how hard people tried to strip it away. That afternoon, Evelyn had just finished a doctor's appointment and decided to stop at her local grocery store. The place wasn't unfamiliar. She'd shopped there dozens of times before. It was a neighborhood chain, the kind where managers walked the aisles with clipboards and cashiers exchanged forced smiles that never reached their eyes. Evelyn, dressed neatly in a cream cardigan and long skirt, walked slowly through the sliding glass doors, her cane tapping rhythmically against the tiled floor. She didn't need much. Just a loaf of bread, some tea, and a few vegetables for dinner. It was supposed to be an ordinary errand, something small before she headed back home. The store bustled with shoppers, young mothers pushing carts piled with snacks, a businessman checking his watch while waiting in line, and teenagers giggling as they tossed candy into baskets. For Evelyn, it was all background noise. Her mind was on her dinner, her grandkids, and whether she had enough time to stop by the pharmacy. But even before the incident unfolded, subtle signs suggested tension brewing. Evelyn noticed the store staff seemed unusually restless. Employees whispered in corners, eyes shifting nervously, as though waiting for something. Behind the service desk stood the store manager, a tall man in a stiff blue shirt with his name badge gleaming under the lights. His posture screamed authority, but not the kind built on respect. This was arrogance masquerading as leadership. Evelyn didn't pay him much attention at first. Why would she? She was just there to shop. But life has a way of turning in an instant. As she moved through the aisles, her cane occasionally tapped a shelf or basket, drawing glances from some shoppers. To Evelyn, it didn't matter. She had always believed that moving with dignity meant ignoring the stares of people who didn't understand her story. When she reached the bakery section, her hand trembled slightly as she picked up the loaf of bread. It was something she'd done thousands of times before, but today would be different. Because the moment she turned toward the checkout counter, the manager noticed her. His eyes narrowed, scanning her with a look that wasn't curiosity but contempt. He muttered something to an employee, and the staffer's expression shifted uneasily. Evelyn caught the exchange but brushed it off. She had learned long ago not to assume the worst in people, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, judged for nothing more than the color of her skin and the lines of age on her face. At the counter, she placed her items down carefully, one by one. The cashier, a young woman barely out of high school, gave a polite, if nervous, smile. But before the transaction could finish, the store manager strode over, his shoes clicking sharply against the floor. His tone was curt, his voice raised just enough for nearby customers to hear. He accused Evelyn of holding up the line, of wasting time, of being where she didn't belong. Each word dripped with disdain, as though her very presence offended him. Evelyn's heart pounded, but she stood tall. Her silence was her shield. She had faced far worse in her life, and she wasn't about to let this man rob her of the grace she carried. But what Evelyn didn't know yet, what no one in that store knew, was that this moment was about to spiral far beyond insults. The manager's arrogance was about to push him across a line that could never be uncrossed. And within minutes, the quiet grandmother everyone overlooked would reveal herself to be someone no one in that store could afford to ignore. The air inside the store shifted. What had started as a normal shopping trip now carried the weight of confrontation. Customers who had been focused on their carts and conversations began to slow, their eyes drifting toward the register where the commotion brewed. A hush fell over the space, broken only by the steady hum of fluorescent lights above. Evelyn Carter, with her quiet dignity, remained still. Her items, a loaf of bread, a box of tea, and a small bag of vegetables, sat untouched on the counter. The young cashier's hand hovered nervously above the register, uncertain whether to continue ringing up the purchase or to step back entirely. The store manager loomed over Evelyn, his posture rigid, his face flushed with misplaced authority. He wasn't just managing a store anymore, he was performing for an audience. His voice rose, sharp and cutting, meant not just for her, but for every customer within earshot. "You people," he spat out, shaking his head. "Always causing trouble, always holding things up. Don't you know how to shop like everyone else?" The words hit the air like a slap in themselves. Customers gasped, whispers rippled through the crowd. Phones came out, screens lit up as more than one shopper began recording the unfolding scene. Evelyn's grip tightened on the handle of her cane. Her knuckles turned white, not from fear but from the effort of controlling the storm inside her. She had been insulted before, overlooked, dismissed. But this was deliberate humiliation. Still, she said nothing. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was composure, born of decades of endurance. But the manager mistook her restraint for submission. His arrogance swelled. He leaned closer, his shadow falling across her frail frame, and sneered. Then, in a move that shocked even him as it left his hand, he struck her across the cheek. The crack echoed in the store like a gunshot. Evelyn stumbled back, one hand clutching her face, the other bracing her cane against the floor to keep from collapsing. Gasps erupted around her. The cashier cried out in horror, tears springing to her eyes as she dropped the items she was holding. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. No one moved, no one spoke. The crowd froze, caught between disbelief and outrage. And then the chaos began. "Did he just hit her?" a woman shouted from the back. "Call the cops," another voice rang out. "He hit an old lady." someone else cried, their phone still recording every second. The manager's confidence wavered, but only for a moment. He puffed up his chest, attempting to mask his fear with more arrogance. "She was in the way," he barked. "She was making a scene. Don't twist this into something it's not." But no one was buying it. The cameras caught everything. And Evelyn, stoic, dignified Evelyn, straightened her shoulders and slowly lifted her chin. The red mark across her cheek burned, but her spirit burned brighter. Inside, she felt the weight of every moment in her life when people thought they could silence her, diminish her, or erase her dignity. But this time, something was different. She wasn't powerless. She wasn't alone. Because what the manager, and everyone else in that store, didn't yet realize was that Evelyn Carter wasn't just another elderly woman on a grocery run. She had a past. She had a name. And she had power in places this man couldn't even imagine. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. People pressed forward, some in anger, others in disbelief. The tension thickened as employees stood frozen, torn between obeying their boss and doing what was right. The manager's mask of authority was cracking, and every second made him look less like a leader and more like a coward exposed. Evelyn's hand dropped from her cheek. She placed both hands firmly on her cane and leveled her gaze at the man who had struck her. The room seemed to quiet again, the kind of quiet that precedes a storm. She took a single step forward, and with that step, the balance of power shifted. Because in just moments, everyone in that store, the customers, the staff, the manager himself, would discover who Evelyn Carter really was. And the man who thought he could humiliate her was about to learn the cost of underestimating the wrong woman. The store had never been this quiet, not even during late-night restocks or early Sunday mornings. Every eye was on Evelyn, the elderly woman standing tall despite the sting still burning across her cheek. Her silence was no longer mistaken for submission. It was the silence of a storm gathering strength. The manager shifted uncomfortably, realizing the crowd was no longer with him. His arrogance began to waver, but pride forced him forward. He jabbed a finger toward Evelyn. "You think filming this will change anything? She's nobody, just another customer causing trouble. I run this place and I won't let anyone disrespect me in my store." Those words sealed his fate, because with a slow, deliberate movement, Evelyn reached into her handbag. The crowd leaned in, curious, nervous. The manager's jaw tightened. He thought she was bluffing. But when her hand emerged, she held something far more powerful than anything he expected. A sleek, leather-bound badge case. Gasps echoed across the aisles as she flipped it open, revealing not just an identification card, but the seal of a woman who commanded far more than groceries and receipts. The golden letters caught the light. Regional Director of Operations for the entire chain. The cashier's jaw dropped. Shoppers whispered in disbelief. Phones zoomed in to capture every detail. And the manager, the color drained from his face. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Evelyn's voice finally broke the silence. It wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of authority, honed over decades of leadership. "You don't recognize me, do you?" she said, her tone calm but sharp. "You've worked under my leadership for years, and today, in front of customers, staff, and witnesses, you thought it was acceptable to humiliate and strike one of your own." Her words sliced through the air like a blade. The manager stammered, I didn't know. It was a misunderstanding." But she wasn't finished. "No," she said firmly, her cane tapping once against the tile floor. "This isn't a misunderstanding. This is who you are when you think no one is watching. This is how you treat the people you believe are beneath you. But today, the whole world is watching." As if on cue, a shopper shouted, "It's live! We're streaming this right now!" Cheers and murmurs rippled through the crowd. The cameras weren't just recording, they were broadcasting. The manager's humiliation was public, permanent, and unstoppable. Evelyn straightened her posture, her badge still gleaming. "You are relieved of your position, effective immediately. Every employee in this store is a witness to your dismissal. Security will escort you out. The manager's eyes widened in disbelief. You can't do that. This is my store. Evelyn's gaze was unflinching. Correction, this was your store. You no longer have the privilege of representing this company. The cashier, trembling but emboldened, stepped forward. I'll call security, ma'am. And just like that, the power shifted entirely. The same man who had slapped her in arrogance now looked like a child stripped of his toys. His shoulders slumped as customers booed, some shouting for him to apologize, others demanding justice. Evelyn wasn't done. Her eyes scanned the room, then settled back on him. But this isn't just about you. This is about every manager who thinks they can abuse their power. Every employee who thinks customers are beneath them. Every leader who forgets that respect is the foundation of service. But it was too late. The cameras had captured it all. The truth was undeniable. And the woman he had underestimated, dismissed as nobody, had just turned the entire store and perhaps the entire company against him. In those few minutes, Evelyn Carter had done what many only dreamed of. She had taken her humiliation and transformed it into a weapon, not of revenge, but of justice. And as the manager was escorted out, head hanging low, the applause followed him like a final verdict. The store felt lighter the moment the disgraced manager was escorted out, as though a suffocating weight had finally been lifted. Customers who moments ago had been silent with shock were now whispering, clapping, and even hugging Evelyn. The cashier, tears streaming down her cheeks, approached her with trembling hands. "Ma'am," she said softly, "thank you. We all wanted to say something for years, but none of us had the power." Evelyn placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Power isn't about titles. It's about courage, and today you showed plenty of it." But Evelyn wasn't finished. The slap may have been personal, but the problem ran deeper than one arrogant manager. For too long, employees across the company had been reporting subtle harassment, discrimination, and abuse of power. She had seen the complaints, the statistics, the patterns, but now she had lived it firsthand. That slap had ignited something much bigger than a single firing. She called the staff together right there in the middle of the store. Shoppers watched with rapt attention, phones still raised, knowing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Evelyn's presence commanded respect, not because she raised her voice, but because she didn't need to. "This incident will not be brushed aside," she said firmly. "I am launching a full investigation into this store's management team. Every employee deserves dignity. Every customer deserves respect, and anyone who cannot live up to those standards will no longer work here." Her words reverberated like thunder. Employees who had been too afraid to speak before suddenly straightened with pride. Some exchanged hopeful glances. Others nodded in quiet agreement. For the first time, they felt protected. Within hours, news of the incident spread beyond the store. The video clips had gone viral online, hashtags trending, millions of views pouring in, comments flooded social media. "This woman is a legend." Finally, someone holding bad managers accountable. She turned humiliation into justice. By the next morning, Evelyn's face was on news broadcasts nationwide. Anchors replayed the moment she flashed her badge, the instant power shifted, the raw authority in her voice as she fired the manager. To some, she was a hero. To others, a symbol of the justice they'd long been denied. But Evelyn didn't let the attention distract her. She used it. She scheduled an emergency meeting with the company's executive board. The managers of the offending store were summoned and faced immediate disciplinary action. But Evelyn went further. She proposed sweeping reforms, mandatory anti-discrimination training, anonymous employee hotlines, secret shopper programs focused not on sales, but on respect and ethics. Some executives resisted. "It's an isolated incident," one argued. "We can't rebuild the system every time a manager slips up." Evelyn leaned forward, her voice steady but firm. "This wasn't an accident. It was a symptom of a larger problem. If one of our managers feels entitled to strike a 70-year-old woman in public, What do you think is happening behind closed doors? Fixing this isn't just good ethics, it's good business. Because today the whole world saw us fail. The room fell silent. No one argued again. Over the next weeks, sweeping changes rippled through the company. Several toxic managers were removed. Employees across the nation reported feeling empowered to speak up. Customers praised the chain for its reforms, not realizing that one woman's quiet dignity had sparked the transformation. As for Evelyn, she didn't bask in the praise. She returned to her daily life, walking with her cane, shopping for her groceries, smiling politely at neighbors who now looked at her with newfound admiration. To her, justice wasn't about recognition. It was about leaving the world better than she found it. Yet the incident stayed with her. The sting of that slap had long faded, but the memory of that moment, the arrogance, the crowd's silence, the humiliation, reminded her why she had spent her life fighting for fairness. And the world remembered too. The viral video continued to circulate, gathering millions more views, sparking conversations in homes, workplaces, and classrooms. For many, it wasn't just about one manager or one company. It was about the everyday indignities suffered by those who are underestimated, dismissed, or abused because of race, age, or status. Evelyn had proven something vital. Justice doesn't always come in courtrooms or headlines. Sometimes it happens in the middle of a grocery store when one person decides enough is enough. The story ended not with vengeance, but with transformation. A company rebuilt, employees protected, customers reminded of their voice, and an elderly black woman who showed that strength has no age limit. As Evelyn told her staff during her final address at that store, respect is not optional, dignity is not negotiable, and justice is something we all deserve. Her words echoed long after the cameras stopped rolling, because what started as a slap ended as a movement,